Sometimes marketing experience comes from a very unexpected direction. In my early days working in the print industry, I was a photo typesetter, a job which has disappeared now. I was tasked with typing all the bed and breakfast listings for a tourist magazine in England's beautiful Lake District, which is where I lived. The guy I worked alongside was a natural comedian, and as a result, we rarely got anything done on time. So I was late, very late. In order to avoid my boss, who would have known how late I was, I ran a spell check on everything and took it straight through to production. Unfortunately, one of the listings I'd typeset was supposed to read dinner, bed, and breakfast. I'd hit the S instead of the D, and of course sinner is a word too, so it got through the spell check. And that's what we printed, 120,000 copies. And I got into a lot of trouble. But then 2 months later, the woman who owned the B&B called up to say she'd never ever been booked out so fast in her life, and she wanted us to run the same words next time. So it became my first lesson in marketing. I read about a couple of very cool ways to get jobs recently. One was a guy who was very knowledgeable in IT, and he really wanted to work for one of 3 companies. He figured out that CEOs often do online searches for themselves. So he built a website which contained a page dedicated to each of them, and on each of those pages was his pitch in the form of a CV listing his experience with his picture and saying how good he was and how badly he wanted to work for that company. And here was his phone number, email, and so on. A couple of weeks later, his phone rang. It was one of the CEOs, highly impressed at such a creative way of looking for work, and after a short conversation, he was offered the job he wanted. Another was a rock band who heard that Google Maps was working its way through their community, so they set up all their stuff on the sidewalk with the name of the band prominently displayed, and as the van came into view, they started to mime their way through one of their songs, and of course it was a huge boost to their careers, as much in recognition of their entrepreneurial skills as it was to anything musical. So there are still some very creative approaches. Much depends on how you can figure out how to adapt available technology to what you want to achieve. Obviously, a good CV is an essential backup to examples of your own work. And as there are lots of sites which will help you put together a good CV, I'm not going to take up the time to do it here. And as for how to offer examples of your own work effectively, I've given a few hints and tips which I hope you'll find useful in the portfolio section of these videos.